The council chamber was quiet. Too quiet. Tui Young stood at the center of the vast room, looking at the empty seats around him. 47 years had passed since the humans left. 47 years of silence. He remembered that day clearly. One moment, humans were everywhere in the galaxy. They had colonies on 100 worlds. Their ships moved through space lanes like silver fish in a great ocean. Their voices filled the communication networks with trade deals, scientific discoveries, and terrible jokes that nobody else understood. Then they vanished. All of them. At the same moment. Every human in the galaxy simply disappeared. No warning, no farewell messages, no distress calls, nothing. The Velthir Empire had sent ships to Earth immediately. What they found confused everyone. The city still stood. Power plants still ran. Cars sat in streets as if their owners had just stepped away for a moment. But there were no humans. Not a single one. It was like they had turned to smoke and blown away on the wind. Tae Young cleared his throat and addressed the council. His voice echoed in the chamber. The delegates from 70 species listened, but he could see they did not really care anymore. The mystery of the missing humans had become old news. Most species had moved on. They had taken over human colonies. They used human technology. They lived in human homes. Life continued without them. Only a few still asked questions. Jiwon was one of them. The Kralik scientist sat in the upper gallery, her 3 eyes focused on Tae Young. She had spent decades studying human artifacts. She believed humans had secrets they never shared. Important secrets. In the back of the chamber, Hayan leaned against a pillar. The old trader had known humans personally. She had drunk with them in space stations. She had laughed at their jokes, even when she did not understand them. She had called several humans her friends. Their disappearance haunted her like a ghost she could not see. Dongwu, the council security director, stood near the entrance. His job was to keep the council safe, but lately he had been doing something else. He had been breaking into human computer systems. The humans had left data behind. Lots of data. Most of it was locked behind encryption that nobody could crack. But Dongwu was patient and clever. He had found ways inside. What he found worried him. The data spoke of warnings, of danger coming, of something the humans called the tribunal, but the files were incomplete, fragmented like pieces of a puzzle scattered across the floor. Tae Young finished his speech. It was the same speech he gave every year. We honor the memory of humanity. We remember their contributions to galactic civilization. We hope that one day we will understand why they left. Empty words. Political words. Words that meant nothing, but as he spoke, something happened. A junior officer ran into the chamber. She was breathing hard, her face pale with fear. She whispered something to Dongwu. His expression changed. He looked up at Tae Young and made a hand signal. Emergency. The council meeting stopped. Dongwu activated the main display. A star map appeared showing the entire galaxy. At the edge of the map, red markers began to appear, 1, then 10, then 100. Then too many to count. What are those? Someone asked. Unknown objects, Dongwu said. His voice was steady, but Tae Young could hear the fear beneath it. They appeared at the galactic rim 30 minutes ago. They are massive, bigger than anything we have ever seen. And they are moving toward us. Jiwon stood up in the gallery. I need to access the human archives. Now, I think I know what this is. Hayan pushed away from her pillar. She felt cold, like ice water had replaced her blood. She remembered something a human friend had told her years ago, just before they all left. He had been drinking. His eyes had been sad. He had said, when it comes, you will understand. Tell them we are sorry. Tell them we had no choice. She had asked what he meant. He had just shaken his head and ordered another drink. The council chamber erupted in chaos. Delegates shouted questions. Some demanded military action. Others called for diplomatic contact. But Tae Young just stared at the map, at the red markers spreading across the edge of the galaxy like blood and water. Dongwu walked over to him. Ambassador, I found something in the human data. A message beacon. It activated when those objects appeared. It has been broadcasting for the last 10 minutes. What does it say? Dongwu hesitated. Then he played the message. It was a human voice. Female. Young. She sounded tired. Sad. Like someone saying goodbye to everything they loved. To whoever hears this, we are sorry. We wanted to warn you, but we could not find the words. We could not make you understand. The tribunal is coming. It has come before. It will come again. We chose to leave. We chose exile over extinction. We chose to save ourselves and spare you the cost of our defense. Forgive us, and prepare. The judgment has reached the stars. The message ended. Silence filled the chamber again. But this was a different silence. This was the silence of prey animals who suddenly realized the predator is close. Very close. Tae-young looked at the red markers on the map. They were still moving. Still coming. And now he understood. The humans had not disappeared. They had run. And they had left everyone else behind to face whatever was coming. Ji-won was already heading for the exit. Hae-in followed her. Dongwoo looked at Tae-young and asked, "What do we do?" Tae-young did not know. For the first time in his long career, he had no answer. He could only watch the red markers spread across the map like a disease with no cure. The moon called Titan IX hung in space like a dead thing. Its surface was gray rock and ice scarred by craters. Deep inside the moon, hidden beneath kilometers of stone, the humans had built a research facility. Ji-won led the expedition team through its cold, dark corridors. Her footsteps echoed. Behind her, Hae-in carried scanning equipment. Dongwoo brought security drones. They had been searching for 3 days. Most of the facility was empty. The humans had taken everything important when they left, but Ji-won knew they must have left something behind. Some clue, some explanation. On the 4th day, they found it. A vault door hidden behind a false wall. The lock was still active, still powered by a generator that had run for 47 years without stopping. Dongwoo worked on the lock for 6 hours. When it finally opened, cold air rushed out, carrying the smell of recycled oxygen and old metal. Inside was an archive. Thousands of data crystals organized in rows like books in a library. Each crystal held information. Ji-won picked one up and inserted it into her reader. Words appeared on the screen. Her 3 eyes widened as she read. "What does it say?" Hae-in asked. Ji-won did not answer. She was already reading the next crystal. And the next. Her hands moved faster. Hae-in could see fear growing in her expression. Real fear. They knew, Ji-won finally said. They knew for decades. They detected it 52 years ago. Quantum anomalies at the edge of the galaxy. Patterns that should not exist. They tracked it. They studied it. They learned what it was. "What is it?" Dongwoo asked. "The tribunal." Ji-won pulled up a display. Images appeared in the air. Ancient images. Strange symbols. Star maps marked with red zones. It is old, very old. It has existed since before our species learned to make fire. It moves through the universe, visiting galaxies. And when it arrives, it judges. Judges what? Hae-in stepped closer. Species. It judges species. Based on their evolution. Their impact on the universe. Their worth. Ji-won touched the display, scrolling through data. It has visited this galaxy 7 times before. Each time, species disappeared. Not just destroyed. Erased. Removed from existence as if they had never been born. Dongwoo felt something cold settle in his stomach. How many species? Hundreds. Maybe thousands. The records are incomplete, but every time the tribunal comes, civilizations end. The survivors remember nothing about the ones who were erased. It is like they edit history itself. Hae-in sat down on a storage crate. Her legs felt weak. Why did the humans not tell us? Ji-won found another file. This one was marked with a human name and date. She opened it. A video began to play. A human woman appeared. She looked tired, scared. She spoke directly to the camera. We tried to warn them. We shared our data. We showed them the quantum readings. They did not believe us. They thought we were making excuses to justify our expansion into their territories. They accused us of creating false threats to gain political advantage, so we stopped trying to convince them. We made a choice. We would save ourselves. We would leave the galaxy before the tribunal arrived. We would not fight. We would not resist. We would simply disappear. The woman paused. She looked down at her hands. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter. We knew what we were doing. We knew that by leaving we might be condemning everyone else. But we also knew that if we stayed we would be judged, and we would fail that judgment. Not because we were evil, but because we were ambitious, reckless, we expanded too fast. We wanted too much. The tribunal judges species on their restraint, their wisdom, their ability to limit themselves. We had none of those things. The video ended. The 3 of them stood in silence. Outside the vault in the dead corridors of Titan 9, nothing moved. But at the edge of the galaxy, the red markers continued their approach. There is more, Jiwon said. She had found a final file. The largest one in the archive. The humans did not just study the tribunal. They planned. They calculated. They knew exactly when it would arrive. And they knew something else. Something terrible. What? Dongwu asked. The tribunal does not judge each species individually. It judges them all at once. Every intelligent species in the galaxy, at the same time. It looks at the entire galactic civilization and decides who deserves to continue existing. Hei-In stood up. Then the humans leaving did not save them. If the tribunal judges everyone, it will judge them too, even if they are hiding in dark space. Maybe, Jiwon said, or maybe they found a way to hide. The archive mentioned something. A technology, a quantum field that can mask a species from the tribunal's perception, but the details are missing. Either they took that information with them, or they never finished developing it. Dongwu checked his communicator. We need to get back to the council. Now, the objects are still approaching. Our scientists estimate they will reach the inner galaxy in 3 months. They gathered the data crystals and left the vault. As they walked back through the dark corridors, Hei-In thought about her human friends. She remembered their laughter, their strange customs, the way they had always seemed a little sad, even when they were happy, like they carried a weight nobody else could see. Now she understood. They had known this was coming. Every moment they spent in the galaxy had been borrowed time. They had been saying goodbye for years, even though nobody noticed. When they reached their ship and left Titan 9, Hei-In looked back at the dead moon. The humans had built their research facility deep in the ice, hidden from everyone. They had worked in secret, trying to find a way to save themselves. And maybe, she thought, trying to find a way to save everyone else too. But they had failed, or given up. And now the judgment was coming, and nobody knew how to stop it. The tribunal arrived on a day that seemed like any other. Across the galaxy, billions of beings went about their normal lives. They worked, they ate, they loved, they argued. They had no idea that everything was about to change. Then the sky tore open. That was what it looked like to Tae-Young watching from the council station. Space itself seemed to rip apart, and through the tears came structures, massive structures. Each one was larger than a star system. They were made of something that was not quite matter and not quite energy. They shifted and changed as he watched, refusing to hold a single shape. The tribunal did not speak. It did not announce itself. It did not make demands. It simply appeared in hundreds of locations across the galaxy, and then it watched. Billions of eyes felt that gaze, even though they could not explain how they knew they were being observed. The first species to act were the Krell. They were a military people, strong and proud. They sent their entire war fleet toward the nearest tribunal construct. 3,000 ships armed with weapons that could crack planets. They fired everything they had. The weapons passed through the construct like light through glass. Nothing happened. The Krell ships moved closer, preparing to fire again. Then they vanished. All 3,000 of them. Gone in an instant. Not destroyed. Simply removed from existence. Panic spread like fire. Species that had been enemies for centuries suddenly forgot their conflicts. They were united by fear. The council met in emergency session. Every delegate had the same question and nobody had an answer. What did the tribunal want? Young-Soo, commander of the Velthir military forces, wanted to fight. He stood before the council and argued that they should not submit to an unknown threat. We do not even know what it wants, he said. We should defend ourselves. Tae-Young looked at the commander with tired eyes. And how do we defend against something that can erase 3,000 ships without effort? The Krell were the strongest military power in the galaxy. They lasted 3 seconds. Mireille, a scholar who studied philosophy and history, spoke up. She was young for a council advisor, but her mind was sharp. The human archives said the tribunal judges species. Perhaps if we try to communicate, to show we are worthy, it will spare us. Attempts at communication failed. Every species in the galaxy tried. They sent messages in every language. They broadcast mathematical proofs to show their intelligence. They played music. They sent ships carrying offerings of art and science. The tribunal ignored everything. Then the first judgment came. The Drellith were an old species. They had lived in the galaxy for 1,000,000 years. They were peaceful. They had never started wars. They spent their time creating beautiful gardens on their worlds. Their art was known throughout space. One morning the Dralith were gone. Not dead, erased. Their worlds remained, but empty. The gardens still grew, but no one tended them. It was like the species had never existed, except that everyone remembered them. That was the worst part. Knowing they had been real and now they were not. 2 more species followed. The Heln and the Vor, both erased in the same way. No explanation. No warning. The galaxy began to understand true terror. Jiwan worked without sleeping. She studied every piece of data from the human archives. She tried to understand the pattern. Why these species? What had they done wrong? The Dralith were peaceful. The Heln were scientists. The Vor were artists. They had nothing in common. Maybe that is the point, Heian said. She had been helping Jiwan, bringing her food and making sure she rested for at least a few hours each day. Maybe the tribunal does not judge based on what we think is good or bad. Maybe it uses different rules. Young-Su refused to accept defeat. Against orders, he took a fleet to confront a tribunal construct. He did not attack. He simply positioned his ships in front of it and broadcast a message. We will not submit. We will not disappear quietly. If you want to judge us, then speak. Tell us what we have done wrong. The tribunal responded, not with words. With action. Young-Su's flagship was pulled toward the construct. He felt his ship being taken apart piece by piece, but not physically. It was being examined, studied. He could feel something vast and cold looking through his memories. Through his soul, then he was released. His ship drifted back to the fleet. He sat in his command chair, shaking. His crew found him there hours later. He was alive, but changed. The arrogance was gone. The certainty was gone. He had been measured by something beyond his understanding, and he had felt how small he truly was. Back on the council station, Tae-young received Jiwan's latest report. She had found something in the archives. A pattern. The species that were erased all shared one quality. They had stopped growing. The Dralith had reached a point of perfect contentment and stayed there for thousands of years. The Heln had learned everything they wanted to know and stopped seeking new knowledge. The Vor had perfected their art and then only repeated old forms. The tribunal judges stagnation, Jiwan wrote. It removes species that have stopped evolving, not just physically but mentally, culturally, spiritually. It wants the universe to grow. Tae-young read the report 3 times. Then he thought about the Velthir Empire. They had conquered 100 worlds. They had built a civilization that lasted 10,000 years. They were strong, stable, unchanging. They had stopped growing centuries ago. Heian came to see him that night. She looked old and tired. I remember something, she said. Something a human told me. She said that humans were afraid because they could not stop growing. They could not stop wanting more. They expanded too fast. They were too ambitious. She said the tribunal would see that as dangerous. But the species that were erased were not ambitious, Tae-young said. Exactly. So what does the tribunal actually want? Heian sat down. What if the humans were wrong? What if they ran for no reason? Tae-young had no answer. Outside his window, the stars looked the same as always. But he knew that across the galaxy the tribunal was watching, judging, deciding who would live and who would be erased from history, and nobody knew how to change its mind. The ship was small, just 5 crew members. Jiwan, Heian, Dongwu, Mirei, and Tae-young. The council had approved their mission with little discussion. Most delegates thought they were insane. Some thought they were heroes. Tae-young thought they were probably both. Their mission was simple. Find humanity. Ask for help. It was also impossible. Nobody knew where humans had gone. The galaxy was vast, but the space between galaxies was infinite. Humans could be anywhere in that darkness, or nowhere. They might all be dead, but they had to try. Behind them, the tribunal continued its work. Species disappeared every few days. The galaxy was dying slowly, like a body losing blood. The first week in dark space was the hardest. There were no stars here, no reference points, just endless black in every direction. The ship's sensors showed nothing. It was like sailing across an ocean with no bottom and no surface, just depth forever. Heian spent her time at the navigation console, searching for any sign of human passage. She was looking for exhaust trails, quantum signatures, anything that might show where a ship had been. For weeks, she found nothing. Then one day, she detected something. Not a ship, something else. A structure floating in the void. It was huge, older than anything she had ever seen. They approached carefully. What they found was a graveyard. Ruins floated in the darkness. Cities, ships, space stations. All dead. All ancient. Some were so old they crumbled at the slightest touch. Others looked almost new, preserved perfectly by the cold of space. These species fled the tribunal, Mireille said, examining the ruins. They ran into dark space just like humanity, but it did not save them. What killed them? Dongwu asked. Time, probably. Resources. Or maybe they just gave up. Mireille touched one of the structures. It dissolved into dust under her hand. You can only run for so long before you have to face what you are running from. They continued deeper into dark space. More ruins appeared. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. All the species that had tried to escape judgment throughout history, all failed. Tae-young began to doubt. Perhaps humans were already dead. Perhaps they had become just another ruin floating in the void. Perhaps this entire journey was pointless. But Ji-won refused to give up. She studied the ruins carefully, taking samples, analyzing the technology. These species ran blindly, she said. They fled without planning, without preparation. Humans were different. They planned their exodus for years. They knew exactly what they needed to survive. On the third month of their journey, Hai-In detected something new. A quantum signature. Faint but deliberate. A pattern repeated at regular intervals. It was a beacon, a signal. They followed it for weeks. The signal grew stronger, and then, finally, they saw it. A star. A rogue star, wandering alone through the darkness between galaxies. And around it a structure. The structure was impossible. It surrounded the entire star, capturing all its energy. A sphere of metal and technology, so vast that planets could have fit inside it with room to spare. Tae-young had read about such things in old texts. A Dyson sphere, a device for harvesting the total energy of a star. That is where humanity went, Ji-won whispered. They built an ark, a place to hide, a place to survive. They approached the sphere. Sensors showed it was inhabited. Billions of life signs, most dormant, sleeping, but some awake, active, watching. A voice came over their communication system, male, human, speaking in the common galactic language. Unidentified vessel, state your purpose. Hai-In took the communication. Her voice shook slightly. This is Hai-In of the Galactic Council. We came to find you. We came to ask for help. The tribunal is destroying us. Please, we need you. Silence. Then the voice returned. You have traveled far. You may dock. But know this. Humanity left for a reason. We cannot help you. They docked at a small port on the sphere's surface. A human met them. She was middle-aged, wearing a simple uniform. Her name was Bo-Ra. She had been an admiral in the human fleet before the Exodus. Now she was a guardian, one of the few humans who stayed awake to watch over the sleeping billions. Bo-Ra led them through corridors filled with sleeping chambers. Millions of chambers. Each one held a human in suspended animation. This is what we became, Bo-Ra said. We ran, we hid. We chose survival over everything else. But you can help us, Ji-won said. The archives mentioned a technology, a quantum field that can hide species from the tribunal. You must have that technology here. Bo-Ra stopped walking. She turned to face them. Her expression was hard. We do have that technology, but we will not share it. Why not? Tae-young demanded. Species are dying. We came all this way. We are asking for help. We warned you, Bo-Ra said. Her voice was cold. For decades before we left, we shared our research. We showed you the quantum readings. We explained what was coming. And what did you do? You ignored us. You called us paranoid. Some of you accused us of making up threats to justify our expansion. Within months of our departure, you colonized our worlds. You took our technology. You profited from our absence. Tae Young felt shame burn in his chest. Everything she said was true. The Velthir had been one of the first to claim human colonies. You are right, Jiwon said quietly. We failed. We did not listen. We did not believe. But consciousness itself is on trial now. If the tribunal erases all of us, what remains? Just silence, just darkness. You fled to survive, but survival without purpose is just waiting to die. Bora looked at Jiwon for a long moment, then she said, "Come with me. There is something you need to see." She led them to a command center deep inside the sphere. Screens showed data, calculations, weapon designs, technology that could tear apart space-time itself. We could have fought, Bora said. We had the weapons, the knowledge. We could have resisted the tribunal. But to do so would have required weaponizing reality itself. We would have had to destroy the galaxy to save it. So we chose exile instead. She turned to face them. Now you ask us to return, to fight, to risk everything again. Tell me why we should. None of them had an answer. They had come so far. They had hoped for salvation. Instead, they found humans who had already made their choice. A choice to abandon the galaxy and save themselves. Outside the sphere, in the infinite darkness, billions of sleeping humans dreamed. And in the distant galaxy they had left behind, the tribunal continued its judgment. Council heard nothing. They waited in small rooms surrounded by sleeping humanity. The silence was heavy, oppressive. On the fourth day, Bora returned. We are having a debate, she said. The other guardians. We have awakened some of the sleepers. Engineers, scientists, philosophers, we are discussing your request. She brought them to a large chamber where humans had gathered. Hundreds of them. Some looked angry. Others looked tired. A young man stood at the center arguing passionately. His name was Jae-hee. He was an engineer who had helped build the sphere. We ran like cowards, Jae-hee said. We told ourselves it was wisdom, that we were being careful, that we were protecting the galaxy by removing ourselves. But the truth is simpler. We were afraid. And now others are paying the price for our fear. An older woman responded. We did not run from cowardice. We ran to avoid forcing a terrible choice. If we had stayed, we would have had to fight. And our weapons could have destroyed everything. We chose the lesser evil, but was it evil at all? Jae-hee shot back. Or was it just convenient? We saved ourselves. We abandoned everyone else. How is that moral? The debate went on for hours. Mireille listened carefully. She was a scholar of philosophy, and she understood what was happening. Humans were doing what they had always done. They were questioning themselves, doubting themselves. It was their greatest weakness and their greatest strength. Finally, Bora raised her hand for silence. She turned to Mireille. You study wisdom. Tell me, what is worthiness? How does the tribunal decide who lives and who dies? Mireille stood. Her voice was steady. The tribunal judges species on their impact on the universe. But impact can be measured in many ways. Violence or creation, destruction or growth. You ran because you saw yourselves as violent, as destructive, as dangerous. But everything we learned about you suggests the opposite. She looked around the chamber. You created art that moved souls. You discovered science that expanded knowledge. You built friendships with species completely different from yourselves. Yes, you made mistakes. You were ambitious. You expanded too fast. But you also cared. You cared enough about others to remove yourselves rather than risk harming them. Heian stepped forward. She looked directly at Bora. I knew humans. I called some of them friends. They showed me kindness when they did not have to. They shared their discoveries freely. They laughed with me. They taught me things about the universe I never knew. You thought you were unworthy because you were flawed. But every species is flawed. The difference is you cared enough to worry about it. A soft voice interrupted. It came from speakers around the chamber. They speak truth. Everyone turned. The voice belonged to Hyunwoo, the guardian AI that managed the sphere. I have analyzed all available data on the tribunal's previous judgments. Species that survived had one thing in common. They acted collectively to protect others, even at cost to themselves. Holographic displays appeared showing historical data, ancient records, patterns. The tribunal does not judge ambition, Hyunwoo continued. It judges selfishness versus selflessness. Species that think only of themselves are removed. Species that consider others, that show compassion, that sacrifice for the greater good. These survive. Ji-won studied the data. Her 3 eyes moved rapidly. Then humanity was wrong. You thought you would be judged for your ambition, for your rapid expansion, but that was not the real test. The real test was what you did when you understood the danger. We ran, Bora said quietly. You sacrificed, Ji-won corrected. You had weapons that could fight the tribunal, but using them might destroy the galaxy. So you chose to leave, to exile yourselves, to give up everything rather than force others to suffer the consequences of your defense. That is exactly the quality the tribunal values most. Silence fell over the chamber. Humans looked at each other. Some were crying. Others looked stunned. They had fled believing they were unworthy. Now they were learning they had demonstrated worthiness through the very act of fleeing. Tae-young spoke for the first time. The Velther Empire conquered worlds. We built power through force. For 10,000 years we have been strong, stable, unchanging. And I think that is why we will be judged unworthy. Because we stopped growing. We stopped caring about anything except ourselves. He looked at Bora. You can stay here. You can survive. But the universe will be emptier without you. And I think you know that survival alone is not enough. It never was. Bora closed her eyes. She was quiet for a long time. When she opened them again, her decision was made. We left to save ourselves and others from our worst impulses. Now we return to prove we mastered them. We do not fight the tribunal. We present ourselves for judgment alongside everyone else. If we are deemed worthy, perhaps our testimony can save others. She turned to Hyunwoo. Wake everyone. All of them. Prepare the ships. We are going home. Understood, the AI replied. Beginning wake-up sequence. Estimated time to full awakening. 6 weeks. The chamber erupted in activity. Humans moved with purpose now. Fear was still there, but so was determination. They had run once. They would not run again. Jae-hee approached the council crew. Thank you, he said, for coming all this way, for not giving up on us. Thank you for listening, Hae-in replied. She felt tears on her face. She was not sure when she had started crying. Over the following weeks, the sphere came alive. Chamber by chamber, humans awakened. They were confused at first, frightened. Many had been asleep for nearly 50 years. But as they learned what was happening, they made their choice. One by one, they chose to return. Ships that had been dormant for decades powered up. Factories began producing supplies. Engineers worked around the clock preparing for the journey home. The sphere transformed from a hiding place into a staging ground. Bora found Ji-won in an observation deck. The scientist was watching the activity below. Thousands of humans moving with purpose. Preparing for departure, we might all die, Bora said. Yes, Ji-won agreed. But you will die as who you truly are, not as cowards hiding in the dark. As beings who chose to face judgment with courage, Bora smiled. It was a sad smile, but genuine. I forgot what that felt like. Being proud of what we are. Then it was worth the journey, Ji-won said. 6 weeks later, the fleet departed. Millions of ships left the sphere, carrying billions of humans. They formed a river of light in the darkness. A river flowing back toward the galaxy they had abandoned, back toward judgment, back toward whatever fate awaited them. In the lead ship, Bora sat in the command chair. Beside her, Jae-hee monitored systems. Around them, the bridge crew worked quietly. They were afraid. All of them. But they were also determined. Course set, Jae-hee reported. Estimated arrival at Galactic Rim. 4 months, Bora nodded. She opened a channel to the entire fleet. Her voice carried to every ship. Every human. This is Bora. We left the galaxy to save ourselves. We thought we were doing the right thing. Maybe we were. Maybe we were not. But now we return. Not to fight, not to hide, but to stand with those we left behind. To face judgment together. Whatever happens, we face it as who we are. Flawed, afraid, but trying. Always trying to be better. She closed the channel. Ahead, the darkness stretched on forever. But beyond it, somewhere in that infinite night was home, and judgment, and whatever came after. News of humanity's return spread across the galaxy before they even arrived. Ships detected their fleet months away. Millions of vessels moving in formation. The sight was impossible to miss. Reactions were mixed. Some species felt anger. Humanity had abandoned them, left them to face the tribunal alone. Now they returned only when it suited them. Others felt hope. Perhaps humans knew something. Perhaps they had a solution. Young-Su watched the human fleet approach from his ship. He had survived his encounter with the tribunal, but he was changed. The arrogance that once defined him was gone. In its place was something quieter, humility, understanding. They came back, his second officer said. I did not think they would. They fled not from the fight, Young-Su said quietly, but from becoming what the fight would make them. I understand that now. Sometimes the bravest thing is to walk away from a battle you cannot win without losing yourself. The human fleet did not approach with fanfare. There were no grand declarations, no promises of salvation. They simply positioned themselves near the largest tribunal construct and broadcast a single message. Bora's voice calm and clear. We are here. We are humanity. We fled from judgment because we feared we were unworthy, but running solved nothing. We return now to face what we should have faced before. Judge us as you will. We accept whatever verdict you give. For 3 days, nothing happened. The human fleet waited. The tribunal constructs continued their observation. The galaxy held its breath. Then on the 4th day, the tribunal spoke. Not with words, not with sounds, but with direct communication that reached every mind in the galaxy simultaneously. Every being capable of thought experienced the same message at the same moment. It was not language. It was understanding, pure and complete, concepts flowing directly into consciousness. The tribunal explained itself. It was old, ancient beyond measure. It had been judging species since the universe was young. Its purpose was to maintain consciousness, to ensure that intelligence survived, not just any intelligence, only intelligence capable of growth, of compassion, of thinking beyond itself. Species were judged on 3 measures: their capacity for growth beyond self-interest, their impact on other conscious beings, their ability to protect and nurture consciousness itself. Technology meant nothing, power meant nothing, age meant nothing. Only these 3 things mattered. The tribunal then focused on humanity. Every human felt it, a presence examining their entire history, every war, every act of kindness, every discovery, every crime, every sacrifice. Nothing was hidden. Nothing was forgotten. Bora stood on her ship's bridge as the examination occurred. She felt the tribunal looking through her memories, through her life, through humanity's entire existence. It was terrifying, but also strangely peaceful. There was no judgment in the examination, only observation. When it finished, the verdict came, not as words, but as understanding that filled every mind. Humanity had fled not to save themselves alone, but to avoid corrupting what they might become. They recognized their flaws, their capacity for destruction. And rather than inflict that on others, they chose exile. In running, they demonstrated the very quality the tribunal valued most: self-awareness, sacrifice, growth through humility. Humanity was worthy. They would not be erased, but the message continued. The tribunal offered humanity a choice. Their survival was assured. But they must now help judge other species. They could advocate for mercy. They could explain context. They could share their understanding of growth and change. But they could not guarantee outcomes. They had wanted to escape judgment. Instead, they must participate in it. Bora felt the weight of that choice settle on her shoulders, on every human's shoulders. They could refuse. They could return to their hiding place and survive. Or they could accept. They could stand witness to the judgment of others. She thought of Hei-In, of Jiwan, of Tae-Young, of all the species who had come seeking help, who had traveled impossible distances because they refused to give up. She broadcast to the human fleet. Do we accept? The responses came quickly. Millions of voices, all saying the same thing. Yes, they would accept. They had run once. They would not run again. Bora transmitted their acceptance to the tribunal. Immediately, humans began to understand. Information flooded into their minds. The history of judgment, the criteria used, the patterns observed. They were being prepared for their role. The judgment of other species began. One by one, civilizations were examined. Humans watched. Sometimes they could advocate. Sometimes they could only witness. It was painful, watching species they had known be measured, weighed, some found worthy, others not. Tae-young's people, the Velthir, faced judgment. Their empire was divided. Those who had shown capacity for change, for growth, for caring about others beyond themselves. They survived, but large portions of the empire were deemed stagnant, unchanging, concerned only with maintaining power. They were erased. Tae-young watched as parts of his civilization disappeared. He felt grief, but also understanding. The tribunal was not cruel. It was simply maintaining consciousness, ensuring that the universe continued to grow, to evolve, to become more than it was. Ji-won's people survived. Their endless curiosity, their drive to understand, their willingness to share knowledge freely. These qualities saved them. Hae-in's people survived too. Their capacity for friendship across species, their ability to see value in beings completely different from themselves. Young-soo's people faced judgment with fear, but Young-soo himself stood before the tribunal and spoke of what he had learned, of humility, of the courage required to not fight. His testimony helped save his people. Not all of them, but enough. Those who had learned, those who had grown. When the judgment finally ended, the galaxy was changed. Fewer species remained, but those who survived understood what was required of them. They must grow. They must care about others. They must protect consciousness itself. The tribunal prepared to depart. Before it left, it sent one final message, a warning, and a promise. It would return. Judgment was not permanent. Worthiness must be maintained. The universe would watch. The universe would remember. Every choice mattered. Every act of kindness or cruelty would be weighed when the tribunal came again. Then the constructs vanished. As suddenly as they had appeared, they were gone. The tears in space healed. The galaxy was alone again, but not truly alone. Never alone. Somewhere, always watching, the tribunal continued its eternal work, maintaining consciousness, ensuring growth, judging worthiness. Abora sat in her command chair. Around her, her crew was quiet. They had faced judgment. They had survived, but the weight of what they had witnessed would stay with them forever. Set course for council space, she said quietly. It is time to go home. The human fleet turned toward the center of the galaxy, toward the worlds they had abandoned, toward the species that had survived, toward whatever future awaited them all. 100 years passed. The galaxy had changed. Not in obvious ways. The stars still burned. Planets still orbited. Life continued. But something fundamental was different. Species that had once competed now cooperated. Wars still happened, but they were smaller, shorter, resolved through talking more often than fighting. The memory of judgment hung over everything. Every species that survived remembered the tribunal, remembered the feeling of being measured, weighed, found worthy or wanting. That memory changed how they lived, how they thought about their choices. Humanity had become something new in the galaxy. They were not rulers, not conquerors. They were witnesses, teachers. When conflicts arose between species, humans often served as mediators. They had faced judgment. They understood what it meant to be found wanting, and they knew the cost of failing to grow. Bora had aged. She was old now, her hair silver, her face lined with years of responsibility. She served as humanity's ambassador to the council, a position she had never wanted but could not refuse. She carried the weight of having judged other species. That burden never grew lighter. She often thought about the species that had been erased, wondered if there had been another way, if she could have argued better, explained more clearly. But she knew the truth. The tribunal's judgment was final. All she could do was help the survivors learn from what happened. Ji-won had dedicated the rest of her life to studying the tribunal. She had built a research station in deep space, where she analyzed every piece of data they had collected. She was old too now, but her curiosity had never faded. She believed the tribunal itself had been judged once, that it too had proven worthy of its role. She spent her days looking for evidence. Hae-in had returned to trading, but her roots were different now. She traveled between species carrying not just goods but stories. Stories of the judgment, stories of survival, stories of growth. She had become a living bridge between civilizations. Her ships were always welcome, no matter where they went. Tae-young had spent decades rebuilding Velthir culture. The empire had collapsed after judgment. Too many of its people had been erased. But from the ruins, something new grew, A civilization based on cooperation instead of conquest, on growth instead of stability. He was proud of what his people had become, even if it meant admitting everything his ancestors built had been wrong. Young-Su had transformed military doctrine across the galaxy. He taught at academies on a dozen worlds. His lessons were simple. True strength lies in knowing when not to fight, in understanding that some battles cannot be won with weapons. His students carried those lessons to every corner of the galaxy. Mireille had become one of the galaxy's most respected philosophers. Her writings on worthiness and judgment were studied everywhere. She argued that the tribunal's gift was not fear, but awareness. Before judgment, species acted without thinking about consequences. After judgment, every species understood that their actions mattered, that they were being watched. Not by the tribunal specifically, but by the universe itself. In G1's research station, a young assistant worked alongside the aging scientist. His name was Kyung-Soo, and he had been born after judgment. He had never known a galaxy without the memory of the tribunal. To him, it was just part of life, like gravity or the speed of light, a fundamental law of existence. One day as they worked, he asked Ji-won a question that had bothered him for years. "Do you think they will ever return?" Ji-won looked up from her work. She gazed out the station window at the stars beyond. So many stars, so many worlds, so much consciousness spread across the darkness they never left, she said finally. Every choice we make, every kindness we show, every moment we choose growth over comfort, compassion over cruelty. That is the judgment. We are being evaluated right now, and every moment after, for as long as consciousness exists. Kyung-Soo thought about that. Then we can never stop trying. No, Ji-won agreed. We cannot. That is both the curse and the gift. We must always strive to be worthy. There is no end point, no moment when we can say we have done enough. Worthiness is a journey without end. That sounds exhausting, Kyung-Soo said. Ji-won laughed. It was a tired sound, but genuine. It is, but it is also what makes life meaningful. Without the journey, what would we be? Just beings existing without purpose. The tribunal did not curse us with judgment. It gave us a reason to become more than we are. Across the galaxy, species worked together on projects that would have been impossible before judgment. They built new civilizations on empty worlds. They shared technology freely. They created art that combined the visions of 100 different cultures. They explored the universe together, seeking new knowledge, new understanding, and always, in the back of every mind, was the knowledge that they were being watched. Not by fear, not by threat, but by the simple awareness that consciousness mattered, that every intelligent being had a responsibility to grow, to improve, to care about others. Humanity had a special role in this new galaxy. They were the species that fled and returned, the ones who recognized their unworthiness and chose to face it anyway. Their story was taught to children of every species, a lesson about courage, about humility, about the strength required to admit failure and still try to do better. On Earth, now repopulated by humans returning from their ark, a monument stood. It was simple, just a single stone with words carved in every language of the galaxy. The words were the tribunal's final message. Worthiness is not a destination, it is a journey without end. Bora visited that monument sometimes. She would stand before it for hours thinking about everything that had happened, about the friends she had lost, the species that were erased, the difficult choices she had made, the weight of judgment she still carried. One day, Haken found her there. The old trader sat down beside her friend. They did not speak for a long time. They just watched the sun set over the human city below, a city that had been empty for 50 years. Now full of life again. Do you regret it? Haken finally asked. Coming back? Bora thought about the question. Really thought about it. No, she said. We ran because we were afraid. We returned because we found courage. Even if everything had gone wrong, even if we had been erased, it would have been worth it to face our fear rather than live with it forever. Humanity's story, Ha-In said, not about being the strongest, not about being the smartest, about being willing to admit mistakes and try again. Yes, Bora agreed. That is our story. And maybe that is enough. The sun finished setting. Stars appeared in the sky above them. Millions of stars. Each one potentially hosting worlds, consciousness, life trying to understand itself, trying to grow, trying to be worthy. Somewhere out there, beyond the visible, beyond the known, the tribunal watched. It always watched, not judging, not yet, just observing, waiting, measuring growth against stagnation, compassion against cruelty, consciousness against emptiness. And across the galaxy, billions of beings lived their lives, made their choices, grew or did not grow, each one contributing to the great question that the tribunal would one day answer again. Are we worthy? The answer was not fixed. It changed with every moment. Every act of kindness made the answer more likely to be yes. Every act of cruelty pushed it toward no. The judgment was constant, eternal, and that was exactly as it should be. Because worthiness, true worthiness, was not something you achieved once and kept forever. It was something you earned every day, every moment, every choice. Humanity's departure had not been the end of their story. It had been the beginning. The moment they chose to face their flaws rather than hide from them. The moment they became truly worthy. And for every other species in the galaxy, Judgment Day had not ended. It continued. It would always continue. The tribunal had not cursed them with eternal evaluation. It had given them purpose, a reason to become something more than they were. A reason to grow, a reason to care, a reason to try even when trying was hard. Especially when trying was hard, G1 was right. The judgment never ended. But that was not a curse. It was the greatest gift the universe could give.